Returning to the rudder for just a bit, back in update number 9 where I built the tail feathers, I mentioned how I would scallop these diagonals so that you wouldn't be able to see them in the covering, you would just see the ribs. Well, I kind of had a different take on that, changed my mind. The fin is sheeted and the rudder was not sheeted, so that made a little bit of a gap, particularly at the hinge line. So I thought I would kill two birds with one stone. What I've done now is I've added some 1.5 mm strips along the leading edge and along the ribs. And now what I will do is sand from the leading edge back to the trailing edge, basically taking off very little at the leading edge and creating a taper back to the trailing edge. That will kill the two birds of having the leading edge basically same width as the fin and creating enough space between the ribs and these diagonals so that hopefully you won't see the diagonals through the covering. A little bit of sanding and we're there. Nice fit between the trailing edge of the fin and the leading edge of the rudder. Almost flush, really nice. It moves freely. And you can tell from the witness marks on the diagonals, which did not get sanded, that there will be a gap between the covering and the diagonals, so they won't show, with the exception possibly of right at the trailing edge here, here, and here. It might show a little bit, but that's okay. I can live with it. For the rudder and all the fabric surfaces on the model, I'll be using SIG Koverall. To apply this, I'm going to use Mod Podge as a heat-activated adhesive. I've done this before with plastic covering, trying to glue plastic covering to blue foam. That by itself doesn't work, but when I used the Mod Podge, it worked really well. So I'm going to try that here. I'm using just a little bit of water with a drop of dishwashing soap added to it to help thin out the Mod Podge. I don't want to actually add water to the Mod Podge, but I'm going to put it on the brush and that will help to thin it out, make it a little, make it apply a little more easily. It usually takes 2 to 3 coats of Mod Podge to build up a thin film enough for the fabric to adhere when heat is applied. That's why I dip my brush in water so I can get thin coats of Mod Podge applied and I don't get thick, lumpy coats, and the lumps will show up underneath the fabric. The good news is that Mod Podge dries relatively quickly. You can usually add additional coats after about 30 minutes of drying. The rest of this process is just like using any adhesive-backed iron-on covering, whether it be a plastic film, or Solartex, or Oratex, or any of those types. So I won't show all of this. I will say that I use a medium setting on my iron to tack the fabric around the perimeter, but I won't shrink it down until I get both sides tacked in place. Now that I have the fabric tacked around the perimeter and along the ribs, I'll wait, trim the excess, cover this side before I shrink them both down. Try to prevent warping that way. I am using the lowest heat setting on the covering iron and flipping the rudder as I shrink to help prevent warping. So now I'm going to apply a water-based sanding sealer for 2 reasons. One, it'll help fill the weave a little bit. And secondly, it should help me sand away all these little fuzzies that I have from the fabric. After sanding back the sanding sealer around the edges, I took another look at the rudder and this trailing edge, and I just really can't live with this. So my first thought was to cut out the trailing edge from here back and replace it with a little bit stronger one. But then I got to looking a little bit closer, and I thought, you know, I could just run a brace from here out to the middle, and I could do that on all three of these areas. The three braces will add a very minimal amount of weight. So I think I'm going to go that route. I have a couple of braces, several braces. They should be thin enough to where I can hide them, much like the diagonals are hidden underneath the covering. That worked out really well. So let me remove the covering, and this will be a good opportunity to see just how strong the Mod Podge does or does not hold the fabric. Yeah, the Mod Podge does do a good job holding the fabric. Matter of fact, you can see where I actually pulled off one of the ribs. I just thought I'd show the last little bit here of removing it. It sticks it down pretty well. Alright, these aren't glued in yet, but I think this is going to work. Rudder's been recovered. Another coat of sanding sealer applied to the whole thing, and then a second coat just to the seams. Try to get them to blend in a little bit better and try to knock down some of the fuzzies. I think the trailing edge looks better, a lot better than it was. Getting the model ready for the covering, both the fiberglass and the Kovarall fabric. I went over the model pretty much with a fine-tooth comb as best I could, filled in areas with some lightweight putty that needed it. Some of these have been on for several weeks. I usually just put it on, let it sit until all the areas are filled. I'm almost always getting dings and stuff in the model through handling it. So I wait till it's all filled, and then I go back and I sand it with some 150 grit sandpaper. The sheeted areas of the fuselage will be fiberglassed before adding the SIG Koverall fabric to the lower open areas of the fuselage. I do this because it's easier to get a clean edge of the Koverall when it overlaps the fiberglass than the other way around. So the fuselage will be fiberglassed in three pieces. I'll do the two sides first separately, and then I'll be adding the top piece, blending in with the sides. Why the blue tape? Well, it's there to protect the raw balsa from excess epoxy blobs that might develop when I squeegee off the excess resin from the fiberglass. Same with that diagonal piece near the trailing edge of the wing. That's the area where the Koverall fabric is going to be attached. These two parts, the landing gear cover and the battery access door, have been fiberglassed and the peel ply has been removed. What I want to show is the different texture you can get depending on the kind of peel ply that you use. Now I'll say right now, I've never used the trademark peel ply, so I don't really know the kind of texture that it gives. But I do have two pieces of 100% polyester, and they're a little bit different. So the gear door cover peel ply used was, I believe this is called China silk. And you can see how it's translucent. And it gives a very fine finish. It's almost like 1500, maybe 2000 grit sandpaper. For the battery access door, I used a locally sourced 100% polyester, and you can see how it's almost transparent. I believe the weave is probably a little bit coarser than the China silk, and it gives a coarser finish. This is almost like maybe 800 grit sandpaper. Now they both work well. The China silk, this will probably just require one thin coat of primer, and then I can probably go straight to paint. The gear door, it will probably require a coat of primer, sanding back, and then another coat of primer before paint. And that'll probably work okay. All right, another unboxing. Ooh, that feels nice. That feels really nice. That feels really nice. I did overlap the balsa by about a quarter inch or so, and then I'll just come in here and feather this in together. Using 60 grit to remove the excess fiberglass and to fair in both layers. So all the fiberglass is now on the fuselage. Last thing to add is the Kovarall fabric. And you can see I've taped off a little bit. What I did here was I taped off about 3/16 on the fuselage, the fiberglass side, giving me about 3/16 of an inch of strip for the fabric to glue onto. And this looks about like the real airplane with the fabric, or the stringer coming inside the fabric right about here. So that looks pretty close. And then along here I have tape separating the joint between the sheeting and the stringer. And I'm just going to apply glue to the stringer here. And then I'll have glue on all the stringers. A little glue here to hold the fabric right along this edge. And then a little bit of glue on the round over. I really don't want to glue up the fabric to here or to here. That gives it a funny look. So I'm going to glue just a little bit along the round over, and then of course on the stringers on the bottom as well. I don't think I'm going to be able to cut the fabric exactly to this correct angle here. So what I intend on doing is just laying a little oversized piece of fabric on, and then after everything is glued down, come along with a very sharp knife and cut the fabric right along the taped line. I'm using Mod Podge again, and I'm going to do it just like I did with the rudder. I'm going to try to cover the whole fuselage open section back here with one piece of Koverall. I don't know if I can do it. The hard part, yes, will be trimming the fabric afterwards. I'm using a brand new razor scalpel, and polyester goes through scalpel blades like nobody's business. So it may take 3 or 4 scalpel blades before I can get all of this trimmed off. But it needs to be sharp, because if it's not sharp, it will just, the polyester fabric will just fray. It won't cut, it'll fray, and then you've got kind of a big mess. I'm gonna try to do it freehand without using any sort of straight edge. Okay, so I got the excess off on this side. Instead of using so many blades, I decided to just use I have a Norton fine stone. This is a fine oil stone. And then this is another fine stone, even finer, but this one seems to work best. Anyway, it will put a nice edge on the scalpel blade. It won't make it razor sharp like it is out of the package, but it does a pretty good job. I can get through about an inch or two, and then I got to sharpen it real quick, about 10 strokes aside. So that seems to help, and it gets me through. It's a little bit slower that way. All right, it shrunk down very nicely. I want to show you another problem area that I discovered. I didn't see it at the time when I was covering, but I have since discovered it. Just as I had a scalloping issue with the trailing edge of the rudder, well, I've discovered I have the same problem along the bottom stringer here. I believe you can see the scalloping little downward curve here up to the former. The former is right here, and then a little bit more right here. Now it's just really on this side. The other side over here is actually fairly straight. It's not bad. But the right side turned out much worse than I had hoped. I had thought that with the 1/4 inch string along the bottom tied in with the sheeting along the bottom here, that would have made this corner fairly strong, and I wouldn't have developed that, but it did. I'm just going to let it go, but in the future, just as I did with the rudder, adding some additional supports, I'll have to do the same here, probably in the shape of like here, here, here kind of thing, so that I'm getting some support here and here. Okay, I believe the final thing to cover on this model is the belly pan. The sides were covered in fiberglass with the wing. I've applied 3 thin coats of Mod Podge to the perimeter, and then the 2 stringers received 2 coats, 2 thin coats. Just as I did with the rudder, I wanted to feel a little bit of the weave, so I brushed on a single coat of a water-based sanding sealer. It's a high solids sanding sealer, so it fills the weave fairly nicely. I do want some of the weave to show. This is a 1/3 scale model, so I want a little bit of the weave to show, so I'm just going to brush on 1 coat. And I also did the same thing already with the fuselage. This is already dry. So with that, I believe I might be ready to do some primer. The wing is now fully fiberglassed, and it is ready for some primer. The primer will certainly show some flaws that need to be fixed, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the wing turned out.